Hey girlies, just a quick reminder before we dive into today's episode. The information shared on this podcast is intended to be general sports nutrition advice and education related to period recovery for female athletes. This is not specific to any one individual, and it may or may not apply to your situation. If you are looking for personalized guidance, be sure to apply to our RBSN Period Recovery Nutrition Coaching Program. Our 4-month period recovery program is designed to help you sustainably get your period back and keep it. You can apply now to get started in our program, and we'll leave the link for the program below. If you're not quite ready for that one-on-one approach, that's exactly why we created the Period Recovery Guide. It's designed to support the girlies working on period recovery, specifically if you've lost it due to hypothalamic amenorrhea. The full Period Recovery Guide is finally out now, and we will leave all of the information for it in the podcast show notes. This is the Eat More Carbs Podcast. Hello and welcome back. This is the Eat More Carbs Podcast. It's Jenna here with Reilly. We are both dietitians and we talk every Thursday about sports nutrition for the girlies. On today's episode, we're doing a case study where we're talking about how an athlete we worked with got her period back while training for a half marathon. Super excited to talk with you, Reilly, about this today. Before we do though, we're going to do our high and low. So sharing just a little bit about our week, the good and the parts we wish had gone a little bit differently. Reilly, as always, can you kick us off?
I don't know if this is a high or a low, so maybe you can help me decide, but I haven't shared this before. Charlie is doing baby gymnastics. I don't know if I told you about this.
No.
Yeah, we go to baby gymnastics like one time per week. It's like basically a free for all. They just like run around and there's like little gymnastics equipment. They have like little trampolines and they have like the, you know, like the little foam pit, and she's learned how to like hang on the bar and stuff. So it's pretty cool. We've been going for probably like a month and I would say 2 months. Last night we actually went because we go on Wednesdays, and this really nice guy who's a parent of a little girl who's also in Charlie's class. Never talked to him before, but he came up to me and he was like, this is kind of creepy, but like, I'm not trying to be creepy. And I was like, oh my gosh, where is this going right now? Like, where is this going? He was like, this past weekend, we were like going out, we were running errands, and my daughter came up to my wife because she was dressed in like athletic shorts, an athletic shirt, and she had her hair pulled back in a bun. The little girl went up to her mom and said, you look like Charlie's mom, which is super cute. But then I was like, is it because I'm just always wearing athletic clothes?
I would take it as a compliment.
Okay. Is it a good thing then, I guess?
The athleisure thing is great. We embrace it.
I'm not mad about it. It's just so crazy like what kids pick up, because like we've not really like interacted a lot with that family at all, because the girl is like 1 or 2 years older than Charlie, and like at that age, like it's very, very different. But it's just crazy what they pick up. I was like, I think I'm honored, but like, does that mean I need to readdress my style?
No, the little girls in that area are just, they're big fans of yours. Because you had that other girl at Nanny Share that like cut her hair to look like yours. Mm-hmm. You're a trendsetter.
Yeah, okay.
I love it. I think it's fun.
Is that a high? I don't know if that's a high or low. I guess it's a high and a low. So that'll be my story for today.
I like it.
How's your week going?
My week has been really good. It's been really busy, but really good, which is always kind of a fun thing to do. It's crazy that we're all of a sudden like most of the way through the week. We're recording this on a Thursday, and it's wild to me that it's already Thursday, because I'm like, I swear yesterday was Monday. So the days are just going by so fast, which is crazy to me. But my low is that, of course, it has to do with my dog, George. Every other dog I've ever known loves to walk. My dog, George, does not love to walk. It takes him about like halfway through the walk until he kind of like warms up to the idea and he's like ready to go. And this morning he was just absurdly rude with how much he didn't want to exercise. And like, George needs to move. His vet has encouraged us, keep him moving, but he's just a lazy dog sometimes. And dragging him up the street, people like look at us because he's like throwing on the brakes. And I'm like, buddy, you gotta move. So we just had a struggle this morning on our walk with him not wanting to, and me just kind of being short-tempered with him.
Does he like lay on the ground? Like, is he like one of those?
Oh, he will. Yeah, he'll flop. He'll throw himself on the ground, like full temper tantrum. That's just George. It's always George. My low or my high is always that dog. I love him to pieces though. My high is just that I have been so fortunate this summer to get to see my family like several times and get to be with my family a whole bunch. Getting to spend time with my family has just been really good. So that's my high for sure. And my other high is that I get to see them again soon. So I'm really fortunate that like I get to see them as much as I do this year. So very thankful.
Oh, love that.
Today we're talking though about how an athlete we worked with got her period back while training for a half marathon. In order to protect the identity of this athlete, we have changed some of the details, but overall we are going to share a case study of walking through a real life athlete that got her period back.
I can't wait. We did this a couple weeks ago with a High Rocks athlete and you all loved it. So we are bringing it back with a half marathon runner. Jenna, you work with our runners at RBSN. So this was one of your clients, and why don't you kind of share a little bit of background information with us?
Yeah, this athlete was collegiate level, running a lot of miles during the week and wanted to continue to train, get her period back, and continue to work towards her goal of running a half marathon here shortly. So when she first came to work with me at RBSN, we had a lot of running that we were doing and we had no period.
Oh, I feel like that's the trifecta.
It always is. Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about what she was doing previously before she started in the period recovery program. So you talked a lot about like high mileage. What does that look like?
High mileage, I think, is an interesting one to talk through because what high mileage is to one person is going to be very different from another person. Because I could say high mileage and I have clients that would say high mileage means 70 miles per week. And I could say high mileage and somebody else would be like, that means 35 miles per week. So with this particular athlete, high mileage for her meant close to that like 35 mile per week range. And for her, that meant that we spaced out our runs throughout our week, with most days we were running and a lot of days we were not only running, but we were cross training as well with some weightlifting. So we were doing a lot of doubles on a day. A lot of times she would go right from a run to the gym to immediately start lifting and then go about the rest of her day.
I think it's so important to define that because like you just mentioned, a lot of the time, right, we, hear about, oh, we're running a ton, I'm training a ton, or I'm eating a ton. And it's so individualized because when we compare ourselves to those around us, it might seem like a ton, but like, especially with fueling, it might not actually be that much.
Yes, 100%. I feel like I get questions all the time on, can I get my period back while still running high mileage? And I'm like, well, I don't know, because high mileage to you is going to be different from what high mileage means to me. And we all have a different definition of what a lot is or what a ton is in relation to like both our fueling and our training.
Yes. And I think too, no matter what type of mileage you run, you should have your period while you're doing it, right? And I don't think that should ever be an excuse for not having a regular menstrual cycle.
Yes, 100%. Running high mileage doesn't mean that you have a pass to lose your period.
Yes. And maybe we can talk a little bit later about like how to fuel properly for higher mileage. And obviously it depends, right? We talk about that all the time on this podcast. But before we do that, why don't you share a little bit about some of the fueling patterns this athlete had while, hitting that 35 per week mileage?
When we first started working together, she wasn't doing any pre-training because it really upset her stomach when she would fuel and then run. So she would essentially start her day under-fueled in the sense that she would wake up, start her run, do her lift, and then have her first fueling opportunity in the day. Because that happened so late, because we had done all of this activity early in the morning, breakfast and lunch fell pretty close together without a lot of opportunity for fuel between those two things. So a lot of times at RBSN, we like to talk about doing a meal followed by a snack. But for her, it was more of like breakfast was a mid-morning experience, maybe around 11 o'clock. And then lunch happened around like 1:30. So most of the fueling that was happening was in the later parts of the day. And most of the training that was happening, if not all of the training that was happening, was early in the day.
I know who this was. Okay.
Yes. Yes, you do. A lot of times too, if she would start adding on additional snacks later in the evening, because she would get really hungry from running and lifting in the morning, and then she would have a lot of snacks late in the day.
Ooh, this is such a, I feel like, struggle or pain point for so many athletes because they feel guilty when they start to feel hungry later at night, when they want those extra snacks. Did you see this with her at all?
We didn't really have a ton of food fears. And that was the good thing, is that like we had a pretty good intake if we looked at what she was fueling with total from the first time she fueled until she went to bed. It was a really big thing with timing. And she never really felt guilty in the morning. But if she did have a lot of fuel later in the evening, she physically felt uncomfortable, which then led to her choosing not to have anything prior to starting the run early in the day.
That makes complete sense. We talk about this all the time, but it sounds like she was really struggling with her timing and her energy availability during her runs, not necessarily like the intake or the total energy consumption throughout the entire day.
Yes, which was a really interesting thing to see. A lot of times when we're working with someone on period recovery, weight restoration or changes with overall intake and fueling is a big thing that we talk through. For this particular athlete, the total amount that she was consuming was honestly pretty good as far as like matching up to her level of activity and what her body potentially needed. The biggest issue was that she didn't have fuel when she needed it.
There's so much confusion with this because athletes do not understand why that they're hitting a certain calorie number. They're hitting 2,800 calories. They're hitting 3,000 calories. They feel like they've weight restored, but they haven't gotten their period back.
Yes. And this is exactly where this athlete started. When she came to me, she was using a trackable device because she was trying to get her period back. And she was like, I'm hitting these numbers. I feel like this is adequate, but nothing is changing. And we weren't seeing any signs or symptoms, and we weren't seeing any progression with her times. And those were two big things that she knew were concerns in her period recovery journey, that she felt like she wasn't making progress in period recovery with no signs or symptoms, and she wasn't making progress in her running because she wasn't seeing any improvement in her running.
I don't want to get completely into it because I know that we did a episode a couple of weeks ago where we talked about the all-in approach for athletes, but this is why I don't love the all-in approach for athletes, to be completely honest with you.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about that.
I'm sure you're going to get into it, but it's so much more about just, energy intake or hitting a certain calorie number at the end of the day. It's about, how do we have energy available for training, which it sounds like she didn't in the situation.
Exactly. And she had a good amount of energy that she was consuming. It just, none of it matched up to her training, which made her feel like really tired during training. She felt fatigued. She didn't feel good about her training, and she didn't feel like she was getting the benefit of her training, because what we really want when we're looking at training is that you can train proficiently, so that way on competition day, it has translated over to that.
Yes. And something that we talk about all the time is like the habits that are preventing you from getting your period back are also holding you back in performance, which sounds like was the case here as well.
Yes, 100%. And she had big goals for both of those things, wanting to get her period back and wanting to perform well.
So what did you do? How did you help her get her period back? Where did you start?
I felt like there were so many places that I want to start, which is sometimes the hardest part about being a dietitian, is that we can look at this overall and we want to like overhaul everything and be like, if we change this, this, and this, we'll get the period back. It was going to be a slower process that we needed to make smart, slow, and sustainable changes, so that way we didn't overwhelm her with a whole bunch of changes all at once, particularly around fueling in the morning. So we started with just adding liquid before she started her run, and that was water. We started with water because she would get up and go without even having like any sips of water. So that was the first thing we started. Once she did that and she was like, my stomach actually handled that pretty well, we moved on to some juice. And then from there, we continued to build on her pre-run fuel. And that was a big thing that kind of helped prevent her feel so hungry, which helped kind of prevent those like multiple snacks that maybe happened like later in the day. Some of that like overcompensation that she was doing later in the day through her meals and snacking that happened after training.
You've had a lot of success with people just adding water, like starting with water before their runs and then moving into more like substantial fueling.
Yeah. The wild thing is that so many runners that I talk with, I'm like, okay, what's the routine before we start that, 5 a.m. run? And they're like, I get up, I brush my teeth, I put on my shoes and I go. I'm like, do you have any water? And they're like, no, like I feel fine. And it's like, okay, we don't know what not feeling fine feels like then, because I guarantee you, if you're someone who gets up and goes because you're worried about like the feeling of sloshing liquid in your stomach or the feeling of fuel in your stomach, you will feel a lot better if we find something that works for you prior to starting your run than you do starting completely fasted and dehydrated.
Yes. You could feel fine or you could feel great, right?
Right. And we want you to feel great. Like feeling great is good. Feeling great means we get to push pace. We get to do all of these fun things in training. So that way you can show up really well on race day.
Yeah, I love it. So sounds like started with water, then you went to some like liquid fuel and then more substantial fuel. What are some other examples of like maybe some of those more substantial fuel options?
By the end, we were doing like waffles with maple syrup on it. We were doing pieces of toast with jam on it. A lot of more carbohydrate based things because that's what sat really well with her. And we had a short digestion window between when she woke up and when she started her run. The other thing that we started to do too, since she did go right from her run into a the lift was to add a snack between the two of those things. So we didn't have a ton of time between that. So we added something small there. And then we prioritized getting in her refueling immediately after. So instead of waiting a ton of time, getting home and showering and getting ready for the rest of the day, we made it the priority to get home and fuel before she kind of started the rest of her morning routine.
It is always so amazing to me where we start an athlete and where they finish just based off of like small sustainable changes. And I think there's so many parallels with this and with running. With running, it might feel like you're not really getting anywhere, but it's those small habits and those small changes, and it's that consistency that really builds up and allows you to meet your goals. And the same thing was happening here, it sounds like.
Yes, 100%. And we didn't do that overnight. Like we added small things and then we increased the size, or just like we talked about with like the pre-training, started with water and then we went all the way from water up to like we were doing multiple waffles before she ran, which was great because then she felt so much better and she felt like she was getting so much more benefit from her training than just running exhausted all the time.
I love that. So it sounds like you really started off with the pre-workout fueling and kind of the inter-fueling between her run and her lift. What was maybe your next step with her?
We had two things that we really focused on once she felt confident in her pre and her post. One of those was increasing her fueling that she had intra-run when she had a longer run. The other was making sure she took recovery days, because before we didn't have a ton of recovery. We wanted recovery days, which then allowed for those longer runs to happen. So she stayed consistent with the total mileage. We just kind of rearranged her running. So instead of running consistently about the same mileage every day, we incorporated some recovery days. We did 2 of them. And then we focused on making sure that those longer runs that she was now going to have were going to be properly fueled. So with that, she had thankfully done intra-run fuel in the past in a race. So she knew what she liked. We just had to tweak how often she was incorporating intra-run fuel within her training. And then we also had to find a way for her to take it with water. A lot of times an issue that people run into with taking a gel or taking a goo is that they take it without any water, which can really cause a lot of gut issues. One of the things that we set up in this instance for her was running a route that was a circular route where she left her water at her car. So instead of having to carry her water with her or find a place that she could get water, we instead just switched those longer runs to be a circular pattern where she could run and stop at her car. And it was a little bit of a hurdle for us to like talk through that even if you pause to fuel and take hydration, it still counts as a run that you did continuously, because that was a little bit of something that she was a little bit nervous about, because on a higher mileage, we sometimes think that we need to continually run in order for it to quote unquote count.
Something that you mentioned here, and I want you to expand on because there's a lot of information circulating around on the internet, is do you need to fuel during half marathon training? Do you need to fuel on like shorter runs? Like when do you start having to intra-fuel?
Oh my gosh, this is such a good question. And the answer is it depends. There's never a run that's too short to use intra-run fuel, in my opinion, especially if you're working on period recovery. We always want you to be in that quote unquote like fed state or have fuel available when you are running. If we have longer mileage, and longer mileage again is going to be defined differently by anybody, but it's hard to get all of the fuel that your body needs in before you start that run to fuel the entire run. So incorporating intra-run fuel is, yes, very important for even a half marathon distance, but you can always benefit from incorporating intra-run fuel. So if we were to look at like a 3-mile run, which maybe you did have the ability to adequately fuel your body beforehand, one, we have the opportunity to practice fueling in a situation in which we are going to be closer to home if we react poorly to that intra-run fuel. But the other thing is anytime that we have additional fuel that we use intra-run, it just goes to recovery. And that's something that you've talked about a lot, Reilly, and have shared that on the podcast before, is that like if we have fuel that we take and then maybe the run gets cut short or we don't run for as long or anything like that, that fuel is still used by the body. It's not like it goes to waste or anything like that. It's still beneficial for us. So more is always more in terms of fueling, especially around running. If you're working on period recovery and you want to maintain your running, having more fuel during your run is always the safe bet.
Always. I think that is something that when I reflect, even like like playing soccer my entire life, not necessarily running, is if I could go back and like do it again, I would have a snack at every practice.
During your practices and all of that, like the things that we wish we could change and see how much benefit we could get out of the practice if we had been properly fueled.
No, that's why I'm a crazy running person.
Hindsight's always 2020 though, you know?
Always 2020. No, but I mean, I even like this morning, I went for a 4-mile run and I brought fuel because I wake up and I have something small and then I go and I can't like adequately fuel with that timing. So I have something with me.
Yeah. If we're thinking about like other athletes that we've worked with, not necessarily this athlete because she was able to like increase her fueling beforehand. But one of the things that we do often is if you can't consume a lot of fuel prior to your run, but maybe you can consume fuel after you start your run. Maybe like that helps with your appetite. It helps with like getting things down once you start to move your body, just like you do. Like that's great that we have that availability or that option to do a little bit pre and then like fuel intra to fuel that entire 4 miles.
So what do things look like right now? Did she get her period back? Did she race? Did she PR? How's she doing?
So with this particular athlete, she actually got her period back about a week before she ran her race, which was great because we then had that clear sign that her body was in a positive energy balance. She ran her race. She ran it with some friends. She was super excited about what she put in for her time. She fueled during. We had a very detailed fueling plan for her leading up to her race day. It kept a lot of the same patterns that we had done during her training, but obviously there was some variability with her having to drive to the start line and things like that we had to kind of adjust for. And then she went to breakfast afterwards with her friends. So it was perfect. And she has maintained her cycle since then.
I love that. Yay. Well, thank you so much for sharing about her. I know that there's a lot of athletes listening right now who are training for some fall races or getting into their fall season, and it can feel, you know, overwhelming and frustrating or almost impossible to get your period back while continuing to train hard. But if you fuel your body properly, like, I mean, this is proof here that it's possible.
It's definitely possible. If you enjoyed this episode where we talk through a case study of a real life example of how an athlete got their period back, let Reilly and I know if there's another type of athlete that you'd like to see us highlight on this, and we will do it if we can. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. If you do have questions for Reilly and I, you can always find us online. You can find Reilly at easy.sports.nutrition, and you can find me at jenna.fisher.nutrition. Thanks again for listening. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.